mine is not a particularly visual presentation, so I think we'll be fine without the projector. I am here to talk about regulation crowdfunding under Title III of the Jobs Act. And so anyone who's tried to raise money knows that it's incredibly challenging because of the limitations the SEC puts on raising funds outside an IPO, and that your pool of investors is extremely limited to relatively wealthy people. And so essentially the SEC has come up with a new approach called the Jobs Act, and it is going to support this regulation crowdfunding. And on October 30th, 2015, the SEC adopted its final rules, which it had been working on for many years, which will allow companies to sell securities through this type of crowdfunding. And Title III of the Jobs Act is created this exemption where you do not have to comply with the other SEC regulations so that this type of funding method can be used to offer securities, essentially to offer equity in your startup company or mid-tier company that's looking for financing. So this is going to eventually allow us to raise a lot more funds easier. The difference here is that this isn't Kickstarter, which is more rewards funding, where a Kickstarter campaign you get a discount on the product, or you get an early release, or you get a special color product that no one else can get. And so you're not actually, as a Kickstarter participant or a funder, you're not getting any equity in the company. So if that company becomes Facebook, that's great. You've got your little special thing that you received as part of the Kickstarter program, but you're not an equity owner of the company. In this new system, you will be able to give and take equity. The limitations under the old regulations were pretty limited. You could only, outside an IPO, take investment from accredited investors, and that was people with incomes of more than $200,000 or a net worth of over $1 million. And you were not allowed to use any public means of trying to get investment money in, such as using the internet or Facebook or websites like Kickstarter. So it was extremely limited. Under the new approach, anyone can invest at least $2,000, really, no matter how what your personal financial situation is. And beyond that amount, you're restricted, but based on your income and net worth, you can scale up from that $2,000 amount. The issuers, the startup businesses, and the people that are looking for funding can use email and Facebook and Twitter and social media to offer their investment. And the keys are that you have to be able to hit 100% of your funding target. So if you say you're going to raise $1 million, which is the upper end, you have to actually hit that target before you offer the equity. So you've got to meet certain requirements. You can't go beyond the $1 million in funding using this method. And you have to make sure that you use an SEC registered funding portal. And those don't exist yet because none of this is launched yet. It's still going to be next year. But there will be accredited portals who essentially will be there to make sure you comply with the funding. And so there'll be Kickstarter type websites presumably out there that will allow you to really go out there and offer your investment round to the world. And these portals will handle the heavy lifting on compliance and making sure you're doing it correctly. This could have a dramatic impact on small startup funding. And the main things that you have to be aware of is that if you fail to comply with the rules as part of a startup seeking funding through this system, you could have some pretty severe penalties. So the compliance is very important. You have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have your financials. You can get by with audited and perhaps unaudited in certain circumstances, but you have to make sure you're jumping through all the hoops. Long term, it is expected to be a $60 billion a year way to raise funds. So this could fundamentally change the way startups get funded. If we've seen how Kickstarter has revolutionized startup funding, where you come up with something that's hot, you have a great video to make it happen, right? That's almost always these ones that really blow up where they're seeking 20,000 and they end up with 2 million. have really good videos, but this is going to really explode that information. So the fine print on this is that there are going to be investment limits. You have your $1 million cap over a 12-month period, so you can't raise any more than that over a 12-month period. There's max investments. You can do an annual investment up to $100,000 or 10% of your annual net worth during a 12-month period, and you cannot sell your crowd-funded equity in the first year. There's pretty significant disclosure requirements in terms of financial statements if you're the company seeking the funding, so you want to be particularly aware of the fact that you're going to have either audited or unaudited financials in order to do this. You're going to have all your ducks in a row. You're going to have the classic things, the description of your business. You have to set your target funding round, and you're going to have to hit that target funding round. You have to say how the proceeds are going to be used. A lot of the classic things that most investors would hope for in your documentation prior to giving you money are going to be required by the SEC. The goal here is to enable funding, but also preclude fraud. And so you'll see both of those things addressed in the regulations. You're going to have to disclose third-party related transactions, these types of things. You have to file annual reports. You have to file those annual reports with the SEC. And if you fail to do so, then you can lose your exemption from what are otherwise extremely burdensome requirements of the SEC. You are going to be able to do this investment round through broker-dealers or funding portals. Broker-dealers are almost always going to be more expensive. They're going to take a percentage of the funding, etc. The portals are really where it's going to get interesting. Will we see Kickstarter-type portals, which are really doing all the SEO and really pushing your investment out into the world so that virtually anyone sitting in their kitchen can give you money? And those portals are going to have to register with the commission. None of that has happened yet, and the paperwork isn't even available to become a funding portal yet, but that's expected in January. And by next year sometime, we should see these portals coming online, and we'll be doing presentations like this and potentially showing a website where you can invest while you sit in the audience and get your equity in the cool startups that we have here in Traverse City. Any questions?
Does it create a market, like say you bought a little bit through that portal, how marketable is what you own? Is there going to be a way to sell it? Is there restrictions?
No different than any other equity funding in a startup, except with the limitation you can't sell it for within the first year. And it's an interesting issue of if there's another round, can third parties sell their interest in a company using perhaps some other type of portal? And I don't know what the answer to that is going to be. There probably is going to be a lot more alienable than if you're the company seeking to raise capital rather than an owner seeking to sell your stake, which is extremely flexible. So as long as you wait that year, you should be able to cash out.
Are there caps on equity levels that a specific individual can draw against the company? So for instance, can a person just come in and slap down and say, I want 75% of the business? Or is there capped out levels and say this is how much equity is available for purchase?
It's going to come from the company side through this particular investment model. So you'll have to have all that documented on the front end, and they're either going to buy it or not. There's going to be limited negotiation here. You're going to make the offering. People will accept the offering by purchasing the equity or debt instrument.
I have two questions. One, you said there's going to be, to set your mark. So say you're going to raise $1 million. You don't raise your $1 million. Does it work like Kickstarter that you don't get any of the investment?
You get none of the investment. Okay. So you have to hit the mark because, of course, from the investor side, they want to invest based on the fact that you're getting a certain sum of money, and they want to make sure that, one of the easiest ways to be fraudulent, I suppose, would be to say, hey, we're going to raise $1 million, just take the first $12,000 and close it up, and where your business plan can't be executed because you didn't get the $1 million you were shooting for.
My other question is, do you envision these portals, these investment portals, to act like Kickstarter? So say I'm at my kitchen table and I'm looking for something really fun to invest in. With Kickstarter, you can kind of pick your categories and roll along and watch videos, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the best idea, or whatever.
Yep.
Do you envision these investment portals to be similar in that it'll be just a huge shopping market of everything under the sun, and you just roam around till you find something right?
No one knows, but I certainly anticipate that that's where it's going. I mean, Kickstarter is a big driver here in terms of the new rules, and there's, the implementation of the rules is something the SEC still has to do, and they've got a tremendous amount of discretion as to how they're going to fill in all those blanks. But I don't see anything within the rules which would make that inappropriate in any way. I think that's really what they're going for, is to put these small startups out there for investment, just like Kickstarter, except you're actually getting a stake in the business. And I know, when you think about how successful Kickstarter is, it really boggles the mind of how big this could be, because when I do a Kickstarter project with a new drone company, on the basis that I'm going to be able to get the drone at 50% off, which, by the way, isn't finalized in design, has never been manufactured before, has never flown, and may never see the market, and yet people are investing millions of dollars in this. So, I would prefer equity if I saw a cool company rather than a discounted drone.
Are there regulations in regards to what type of terms they're offering the companies? Is it pretty flexible, and whether it's preferred stock, common stock, convertibles?
I haven't seen anything that precludes that kind of flexibility. So I think that as long as it's disclosed and transparent, I think there's going to be a lot of different options here.
So is this going to make current Kickstarter type platforms illegal?
No. So you could still go for a discounted drone if you want it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what impact it has
So why are
on,
they doing it? Why is the SEC involved?
because there could be $20 billion of money invested in startup companies once this program launches that can't currently be invested. So think about how few people have $200,000 in income or $1 million in net worth compared to, everyone that's out there. And if everyone could put in $2,000 and something gets hot, that $2,000 could hit $1 million real quick if it's of interest to a niche segment. So the whole point here is to grow small business and grow the startup economy in the United States. And by the way, if you want to do private placement, if you want to do a round of 5 million at the same time you're doing this and you're only dealing with qualified investors, you can double track those as long as everything's disclosed.
Yeah, I've just done a lot of raising money in real estate with partnerships, and a lot of investors just don't want to go through all the paperwork.
It sucks.
I mean, they just don't. So it's interesting to see how this is going to work out. Kickstarter is very popular, but to put it in a very, a legal fashion with all the paperwork, I don't know.
Yeah, and the lawyers don't want to get involved because we don't want to insure the transaction.
Yeah.
And and we're not going to vet the investors, and we're not going to, it really becomes it's a challenge to get beyond friends and family financing.
Say you get 10,000 investors at $10 each. What's your requirement for sending them annual Ks?
Yeah, there's a lot of reporting requirements here. The one big difference here for most startups that operate on a shoestring, who don't do the books very well and don't do audited financials and don't do how many small startups actually file their annual statement to the state of Michigan for their LLC. The big thing here is, if you're going to go through this program, you better be able to do the paperwork and comply with these basic things, which are good for any business, but you get in real trouble if you get outside the regs.
It's a big difference from Kickstarter, where you just
Yeah.
take your money, say thank you, and check my website for updates.
Yeah, maybe we'll never see you again, right?
What did you say was the timeline for implementation?
So it's going to be, I think the paperwork will become available to become a registered portal in January. The rule just got posted in the Federal Register, and it's 180 days when the regs can take effect. So you're really talking about spring of next year. You'll start to see these things roll out, and they'll start to become websites that'll help companies go through this process. And if you want to be a company that is going to be a Kickstarter type company and make a significant investment building that out, there's going to be a tremendous amount of money to be made here, being the portal.
One more question, if we
Oh,
want to do
yep.
that one, and then
Do
we'll.
you see Kickstarter being the incumbent here? I mean, is there gonna be room for Indiegogo or other small startups looking to build portals? Is that something you're?
Well, I have, so no one knows, and so the reality is it's very unclear who are going to be the portal, but it's hard for me to believe that Kickstarter and others aren't going to be right there at the front of the line, because they know how to do this on the tech side. And a lot of companies who do different placements, et cetera, they're doing it in a very low-tech fashion because they're not allowed to do anything online. And so this is going to be a real blend between the tech piece and the SEO piece to be able to drive the investment opportunity throughout social media and the web, and then in the compliance piece. Yeah.
One last question. Have you guys used like AngelList or Circle Up? Have they accredited?
We have not. You know, we leave funding to our clients. We help them in certain ways, but you know, there was a great point earlier. I mean, we try and stay the hell out of it because it's just a thicket from the professional standpoint to be able, you're hoping they get funded, but there are firms out there who just do securities, and they get paid a lot of money because the risks are so high.
All right, great. So if we have more questions, we can take them next door.